Okay, everyone, welcome to Startup Sauna's session in assembly. Just 2 words to Startup Sauna. We help early stage companies from Northern Europe, Finland, Scandinavia, Baltic countries go forward with their team, with their idea, raise international funding and launch their product. Today we have 4 of our coaches here on the stage who are all experienced entrepreneurs and investors, and they practically know it all. There's nothing they don't know.
There's nothing they haven't failed at yet.
I'm hoping that as many of you in the audience as possible will ask as tough questions as possible, so we'll see how the sages work in action. But from left to right, we have Jussi Laakkonen, the CEO of Amplifier, who's also the main organizer of Assembly, already, 19 years?
20.
20 years, damn it. 90. Next one being Ilkka Paanen, the CEO of Supercell, serial entrepreneur. Supercell being one of the hottest gaming companies in Finland currently. Then we have Jani Penttinen, who is the founder of Xiha Life, currently running Transfluent as the CEO. Really cool company, you'll hear more about that. And last but not least, Petteri Koponen, who's the managing partner at Lifeline Ventures and known as the founder and CEO of Jaiku before that. But I'd like to give you guys an opportunity to tell a bit about your background, what you guys have done. You know, you used to sit in an audience like that, perhaps. So how did you come here? So perhaps Jussi would like to start.
What I've done, well, assembly for one has been a big passion, and I think the big thing for a lousy coder with big ambitions is meeting great people who are even better than you are. And I think that assembly has always been about meeting people and coming together and competing. It's been a very fertile ground to meet awesome people. And from that ground, we've seen a wellspring of companies like in the game development area, especially like Remedy, Bugbear, Housemarque. A lot of this talent was founded on demo scene talent. And a lot of people here in the audience, even as I can see, are from that talent. So I had the very good luck of getting involved with very smart people and then contributing a little bit on helping people to drive that talent towards companies. So in addition to Assembly, I've been at F-Secure for 6 years. I did some new media back when it was still new media. I was at Bugbear Entertainment as the lead for business development, signed a few projects, produced Sega Rally for PSP, and then started my own company, which failed and turned into Amplifier. We started as a game developer, but we failed at that, and we started promoting games, and that's been pretty successful.
Yeah, why did you start Assembly?
I started at Assembly. I didn't start Assembly. So the correct term, the kudos for starting Assembly goes to other people, but I was involved in the very first one through a demo group called the Future Crew. And I was an organizer in 1992. And since 1995, I've been one of the main organizers, which there are 2 of since 97 or so.
Okay, and could you give in 10 seconds what Amplifier does?
Amplifier helps game developers find users by partnering with other game developers.
Okay, Ilkka, so you started at Sumo back in the days. You were studying at Helsinki University of Technology. So could you tell a bit about that? How did you guys get started?
Sure. Well, from my part, it was mostly a coincidence. So I just happened to know this guy who was part of actually a demo group called Sumo. Who actually
Virtual Dreams.
Virtual Dreams.
And the demo was called Sumo.
Exactly. I always get that part wrong. But anyway, so these guys were setting up a company which they decided to call Sumo for whatever reason, and they needed somebody to help them on the business side. And I was, of course, extremely eager. I knew next to nothing about the business besides the studies and had 0 work experience on anything related, but I decided to kind of take a challenge, and that's how it got started in June of 2000, actually. And you know, after lots of mistakes and a lot of tough years, the company started growing, and then they ended up selling it to Digital Chocolate in 2004. Was with that company for 6 years as a president. I saw it grow to like 400 people or so, and then 2010 I left and took some time off, joined part-time Lifeline, Petteri's group, and helping them out in sort of games related.
Yeah. So what is Lifeline Ventures?
I'll leave that to the main guy here, but helping them out on games related investments basically, and then co-founded Supercell with a guy called Mikko and became the CEO of that, and still on that track.
And it's going well. Congratulations on your launch a couple of days ago.
Well.
So Jani, you've been you've spent a long time in the demo scene, as you know most of the people have in this room also. So how do you get started on Xiha?
Well, Xiha was actually on my second career, so to speak. I started by making demos like early 90s. That led me into game development. I was a 3D programmer for quite many years. Landed in Las Vegas, living there, working game studio called Westwood Studios. And made a few games there until EA decided to shut down the studio. And after that, I kind of lost my interest in working for games because, well, obviously, I'd been working very hard and I saw the potential of the studio and then they just shut it down. So, you know, that kind of, I wanted to have a break. So I moved to China. And Xiha is Chinese, that means happiness. I ended up there just studying completely different things, which, you know, kind of one thing led to another. And a few years later, I found myself running a social network called Xiha Life back in Finland. So I had, you know, went around the whole world, ended back in Finland, was running the social network, and everything was fine except that we didn't make any money with that. So sooner or later, I had to make the tough choice of kind of changing courses, and Xiha was fun for a while. Now, what we're doing with Transplant is sort of similar, but it actually is making money, so kind of.
Okay, so what is Transplant in 10 seconds?
Transplant localizes social media, like Facebook pages, as well as applications, like games. So we've localized quite a few games recently for iPhone, for instance. We make it completely effortless for the developers. So you make a game, we make it run in 20 different languages, then you put it out to the App Store, and we basically multiply the amount of money you can make.
Okay, so Petteri, you started back in Helsinki University of Technology also with First Hop. So what happened?
So I actually started in early 80s. I got probably one of the first Commodore 64 computers in Finland and started programming even before I didn't even have access to a proper assembler back then, so it was just numbers, typing numbers and that kind of stuff. Then I went to the university. I thought that programming is not really a career, so I went to study technical physics. And I later ended up starting a company called First Hop back in '97. Since then, I founded 4 companies. We've sold 2. One of them was Chaiku that I co-founded with Jyri Engeström. So I've been an entrepreneur almost all of my life. But the last 3 years, I've been doing early stage investments. And for some reason, we've done quite a few games related investments. So if we count Amplifier as one, we have 6 investments in the area of games. So in addition to Supercell, Grand Crew, the ex-Mr. Good Living guys, Markus Pasula and others, Non-Stop Games, Gray Area. Which one I'm missing? Non-Stop Supercell. Okay,
I think you pretty much covered them. I think
pretty much all. So
Why did you guys invest in Amplifier? Looking at Jussi over there. So what did you see in this guy that you wanted to put your money in this company?
he is
A lot of redeemable qualities.
you don't want to know.
Actually, I remember it very well. I mean, Jussi and I were having lunch at Zen Sushi.
Yeah.
And he was pitching his games the second time. And I just couldn't get excited about them and that business. And then in the end of the lunch, when we were leaving, he said that he was a bit depressed. Usually he's manic, but now he was depressed. So he said that, I have also this idea of cross-promotion network. And it almost immediately sounded great. And I said that, just work on that idea. And instead of just thinking about the idea, he went on and launched in a couple of weeks the first version of Amplifier, and I think we agreed on the investment a couple of days later. So it just sounded so so relevant. And of course, Jussi is a great entrepreneur, so it was a very easy decision.
Okay, so Jussi, looking at the other side of the table, you went to the meeting. Petter didn't like what you had, so what happened? What did you do?
Well, pitching is like singing to the choir. If the choir doesn't want what you do, don't pitch, because you can only get people who believe in you immediately to invest. You cannot convert people who are disbelievers. So I didn't really know that, but fundamentally going to that meeting was about us having struggled a year and a half making our games, and they were finally starting to get some traction. Some of them were actually, even though Petter didn't get excited about them, actually had some people excited about them, and the team was excited. But the problem is we were running out of money. And the market on Facebook had changed rapidly, in which previously you could get a lot of users through spam or virality, and now that was going down and the prices were going up for ad prices. So we had to figure something out to solve our own problem. How do we stay alive? And then by partnering with other game developers, we figured out that if large companies make a lot of games and they cross-promote them internally, maybe we small developers could partner together and share users, because users play more than one game. And it turned out to be a very, very timely idea. And I think one takeaway I would give to any aspiring entrepreneurs is, unfortunately, luck or timing plays a huge amount of role on your success. The best idea in the planet, executed perfectly in the wrong time, will not succeed. So timing is really important. If we wouldn't have created Amplifier, the cross-promotion network, somebody else would have done it. It was really kind of so timely that maybe 2 months later, we would have been too late. So it just happened to be that we had the right idea, right timing, right team, right connections, and it just exploded after that.
Okay, so Jani, you had a similar experience of running out of money with Xiha, and you went ahead with Transfluent. So how's the situation? How did you figure out that we have to do something else, and how did you proceed?
Well, I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out that you're running out of money, because you can see the bank account and it's getting emptier, and you know that you have to pay the salaries every month. And so we knew that we had to either close down the company or do something else. And obviously you cannot do something completely different with the team you have. You have to stay in the expertise of the team. So fortunately, we'd been asked by quite a few companies, including Rovio, to help out on doing something like, Xiha was basically helping people talk to other speakers of other languages in other countries. So it was kind of like bringing the world together, breaking down the language barriers. It was for consumers. So many companies had asked us, well, could you help us? Could we have something like that on our website where our users could talk to us even if we don't speak their language? So we thought, well, maybe there is something we can do commercially where we would do it for money instead of just if you put something for consumers, then nobody wants to pay any money for that. And so we tried out, and turned out quite quickly that there were companies willing to pay money for that. And it started evolving, but pretty quickly, we were at the point where we were able to raise a small round of kind of seed funding for this new venture. So the company was able to stay afloat, and we were able to turn around. It was kind of painful 9 months to go from nothing to a new product that we launched 1 year ago, but it turned out to be, again, the same way, the right timing. I think maybe the year before you wouldn't be able to do what we do now because of crowdsourcing kind of immersed and gave us a chance to provide really fast professional quality translations. And maybe 1 year later, like, the opportunity would be gone already. So you really have to be lucky with the timing. You have to have the right pieces in place. Even if you have the idea, then if you don't have the team, or otherwise you cannot use the opportunity, then you just lose it.
Okay, so talking about teams, Ilkka, you guys started Supercell with 6 people around 2 years ago, or almost exactly 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So what kind of a team were you looking for when you were getting the founding team together? What did you know that you needed to have?
Well, basically, I think we kind of took a kind of approach that we, like in previous experience with Sumo and also with Digital Chocolate. At Digital Chocolate, I was managing almost 200 people. I was running the whole studio operations, and always when we did a hit game, they had one thing in common, and it was always that they had a kick-ass team. And I kind of had come to this conclusion that making games is all about having just the best people, and And myself and Mikko, we kind of had this idea, and we still actually have, and it's a very big part of the company, is that we actually believe that startups, and especially game development startups, you have to put them together like you would put together like an NHL ice hockey team. So you need to have a best possible player for each kind of position. So you need to have a kind of the best goalie and best defenseman and best center and best wings. And that kind of is the philosophy behind the Supercell. And then they just figure that okay, we need this amount of people, and we wanted to have kind of fairly large co-founding group. And then they just asked ourselves who are the best people we've ever worked with, and that's how it kind of got started.
Just one point is that making a game is very different than making a games company. And as an investor, I mean, I always see really good game development teams that are really bad in developing companies. And maybe they can launch, I mean, then probably taking VC money is not the right way to go on, because, I mean, developing company is very different. You have to deal with a lot of issues that are not related to games. It's like human resource things and psychology, recruiting, legal issues and this kind of thing. So you need to have people also who are passionate in creating a business. So the biggest problem as an investor, I think the biggest problem that I see is that is a so-called idealistic games development team that really wants to do the game that they have ever always dreamed about, and then the business comes second. Yeah, true.
So Ilkka, how does that compare with how you develop games at Supercell? So say you start a new game sometime soon. So what are you looking for? How do you start development on a new game? What are you looking for? What are the ingredients?
Well, first of all, we think that all the game ideas, they have to come from a team itself. I mean, there's like kind of this kind of top-down thinking that the management thinks that, okay, here's an opportunity and we want to do this kind of a game. It always leads to a failure. I mean, I've seen it happen like multiple times, and every single time it has failed. And I'm slowly kind of starting to learn the lesson here. But yeah, basically, I mean, usually it comes down to one individual, small group of individuals who have this great idea, and then they kind of, and usually like when there's a great game idea and it has potential, it grows quite quickly, so that other people get excited about it too. And you kind of, when you walk at the office and you were at the coffee machine, you hear people talking about this new cool idea, and it may be a little bit secret, and people just you can feel the excitement in the air. So that's how it kind of gets started. But then of course, like once the idea has like developed enough into say some sort of prototype stage, and by the way, the prototype can be just a PowerPoint presentation with some animations or paper prototype. It doesn't have to be actual code, although of course that's the preferred way of doing it. But anyway, you have this prototype, then you start to ask yourself the really tough questions. You look at the market, okay, what does the competition look like? How do we position this game towards the competitors? How broad is the appeal? How much would it actually cost to get this game to the hands of the end users in terms of advertising and so on? But I always prefer to lead with the kind of creative people, with the design and the kind of fun, the essence of the game. And once you kind of are like far enough with that kind of phase, then only after that you need to get the business guys involved. If you do it the other way around, it's a failure, like guaranteed.
So Jussi and Jani, you have been both long involved in the demo scene. So you've seen a lot of teams, emerge, teams get started. So what are your thoughts there? I mean, what are the teams that go far? What are the teams that actually, make it? They become companies and they start growing and so forth.
So there's no, I would say, demo scene doesn't directly lead into startups. It leads to talent, leads to ideas. There is no, it doesn't mean that every demo group becomes a game company, but this has happened in Finland several times, so there's correlation but no causation. A good demo group is very different from a good company. It's very, very different. A good demo group is an artistic endeavor which is about self-expression and creativity, and there's typically no financial incentive whatsoever, even though you may win some money at assembly. So I think demo scene is a great place to flex your creativity, your muscles, learn things, become proficient, and that's how I think, then you, like what happened in the 90s, and we had the skills, and you ask yourself, well, I love doing this stuff, what else could I do? And then you look at you look at the games and you just go like, those games suck. I can program a better one. That's a typical Demoscene attitude. I can do better. And then that led into the foundation of companies, and that probably led Jani on his way to from Ylimutka to Las Vegas.
Yeah, pretty much that way. I mean, the talent thing is one thing. Like you do what you really love, so you learn and you become like really good. I basically came from Ylimutka and went to become one of the lead engineers at EA, which was at the time the biggest game publisher in the world. So I was basically able to go to the top in the industry because of the Demoscene roots. You know, that gave you years and years of boot camp of, you know, you really want to learn, become better. But I think, like Jussi says, there is no business development in same way. So pretty much all the success stories we have in Finland that came from Demoscene are, there was somebody outside of the actual demo making who had the business sense, and he was able to hire, recruit a team of people who knew each other and who were very good. I think that was the core of
I disagree. You look at Remedy, that Samuli was the essential piece.
But he was not a programmer, he was not an artist.
He was an organizer.
Yes, he was an organizer. So there was outside of this traditional, Future Crew was the first very well organized demo group. Before that,
we were the commercial demo group.
Yes, firmat soittelee meille,
yes.
All these kind of things. So, that's what I mean.
Yes,
a bunch of programmers and artists coming together doesn't mean it's going to be a company. But because they learn to work together, if somebody didn't give them the business, then they will do good.
I think the takeaway really from the real takeaway from Demoscene, and exactly what Jani said, is passion. Like when you're young and you're driven, you learn things that you're passionate about, and then you can potentially take those skills and apply them somewhere. Whether it's like material science, whether it's social media, whether it's programming, whether it's whatever it is. If you want to be in a startup, in a founding team, you need to be exceptional at what you do. You need to be very much a self-starter. You need to be a person who strives to excel every day, wants to go further. And I think there's some internal dissatisfaction. You're never good enough. You feel you have to have something where you can aspire to, and you want to go further. So those qualities do exist in Demoscene, and they exist everywhere. And then people who take those qualities and apply them to self-improvement can become people who can be founders, or they can become part of the founding team. But even putting together a game development team, as Ilkka said, is hard, but putting together a founding team is even more harder, because every single person there will be the failure point, potentially. So if you don't have people who are these kind of strivers, achievers, who are irrational in the sense of that they can and believe they can change the world, and at the same time somewhat rational, they know how to kind of execute.
Yeah. And by the way, I think one implication of what Jussi just said is that you very rarely can you put together a company, the founding team, together with your friends. Because it's very, very likely that people who are friends with you, they think the same way with you, and you kind of get along really nicely, and everything is nice and fun and so on. But that's not how ideally the founding team behaves. You need to have differences of views and different kind of competencies. And it's very, very, very likely that that's not your kind of group of friends.
Yeah, and you can go to business as friends, but you don't walk out of business as friends typically. So it's tough, but that happens also. So I fully support the thing that you need to have separate views, but at the same time, I would also say that sometimes if you know exactly what you're making, if your audience is your own, there are two types of companies. Ones that make products to which they are their own user base. Like we made Amplifier to help ourselves. We knew exactly what we wanted. And then there are companies who make products for other people to use, and then you need to have a much broader sense. But if you have a team that really is kind of solving their own problem, like say GitHub, all programmers, probably all from the same stock, and they made GitHub to help themselves to use Git. So, exceptions we don't have the truth, sorry. Apologies, there's no truth here, just opinions.
So Petteri, how do you recognize a good founding team? What are you looking for?
So we always look for hackers in a sense, not just in the games, but also in, let's say, medical devices or health or waste management, even some other areas that we involved in. So people who are who are really passionate and exceptionally good in kind of the core expertise of that field. And then we look for scalability. So at least one, hopefully even more members of the founding team are scalable. So we think that if this company has 200 or 300 employees, could these people be still leading the company? And we've noticed that although it sounds weird, these kind of scalable teams are much better also in the very early stage when they have a couple of employees. And then we look for category leadership. So when we invest in games, we never invest in just one game, but we think whether the company can really become a leader of a category. And then and maybe after that we think whether this category could be meaningful in the long run. So like Supercell, the strategy is to be the leader in tablet games. So that's a very clear category. And this is a global leader, not just like the best company in the Helsinki area. And Non-Stop Games is doing cross-browser games and gray area location-based games and so on. So we try to look past the first game. One important thing for an investor and also for the team, if they are in it for the long run, is to really think like, why is this kind of a game or this category a good business? It's like, what are the drivers there? And if you think about games, it's all about customer acquisition cost, retention, and revenue. So 3 components. And basically you can think about all the games companies, successful game companies, they are exceptionally good in at least one of these dimensions. So if you start a company, if you want to create a business, you should really think about these 3 metrics really well. Can you acquire users in a very cost-efficient manner, or can you make a lot of revenue per user like World of Warcraft is doing, or some of the Dragon Veil, for example, on mobile? Or do you have exceptionally high retention? Again, World of Warcraft has actually all of these 3 components, and Angry Birds has like 0 cost customer acquisition at the moment. So I mean, that's just the kind of the business aspect of games.
Okay, so beyond thinking from the business side, you know, what you should be starting. So if you guys were, for instance, you were 20 years old now, or 25 or 30 or something, and you had, you know, being in a startup ever, and be watching this and figuring that, hey, I would be interested in starting a company. Perhaps we also already have a team. Perhaps, you know, you've been working on something already. So what would you guys do? What would you guys do after you know stop watching or you know this session ends and so forth? What would you do?
Apply to startup Sauna, of course.
That wasn't a paid promo.
So what to do is when I started my first company, there's fairly little expertise out here in Finland about starting companies, and we just started because we thought it was cool and we should be, you know, getting paid for doing stuff. So today, compared to that, today there's a lot of advice, mentorship available, even money, networks. So I think that's really changed in the Finnish ecosystem in the last 15, 20 years. So you are not the first one doing it, which means that the people on the stage or other places, they may not be smarter, but they're more experienced, and you get a wealth of opinions and advice, and then you pick the ones you believe are most applicable. People don't know your business well, you do, but they can challenge you. So that challenging, that funding, that networks, that training, use it because you want all the advantages you can get to go faster and towards the target instead of waving around and meandering and trying to figure out how to do things. So that would be my biggest difference to when I started and what's available today.
Any thoughts to add on that?
I think in games especially, I think it's really important if you start a games company. I mean, the number one thing and the first thing that I would think about together with the founding group is that what is the goal here? What are we trying to achieve? And because then that actually dictates the kind of next steps, and it sounds like self-evident, yeah, and of course it's like that, but still it's amazing how even like say Petteri and I, we get a lot of investment proposals from groups who what they really want to do is, as Petteri said, is that they want to develop the game they've always dreamed of, but I mean they don't want to really, for example, ever sell the company to anyone, or they don't want to have liquidate the kind of shares. And obviously, like from investors' perspective, I mean, why would a investor invest into a company if the founders won't ever want to sell the company, or you know, go public or anything? So I think there's like fundamentally like two different kind of approaches, and of course many in between. But there's a kind of like the kind of a lifestyle games business, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that kind of approach. But you basically just want to do games because it's fun, which it is. And you don't really care so much about the size of a company and so on. You just want to do games because you love what you do, and that's all you care about. And that's completely fine. But then if that's the case, then you shouldn't, for example, waste your time meeting investors, because no investor will invest in a company like that. And you know, and then of course there's the other extreme, is kind of venture funded, like scalable games business. And that's a whole different story.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're like 20 and you think about you want to run a game company, then I think the first thing would be to either try and make a game, like iPhone game on the side of the studies, all by yourself, go through the whole process, or find a job at a game company and spend a few years working and you know, seeing how it goes. It's I don't think it would make any sense to try and start by starting a company when you're 20 with the idea that, okay, I want to start a game company. It has to come from the passion of you know, wanting to create something, and you start by creating and not by starting the company when you're 20.
So if you want to start a startup, join a startup, basically.
Yeah.
Or if you want to make games, make games.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't get hired in a game company if you haven't made games. Like it's like when I was hiring for Bugbear, I interviewed probably 300 people over 4 years, and people come in, I want to make games. Okay, so what have you done? Well, nada. And then the best case of this, I had a person come to interview for a position as a producer, and he was at Alko doing marketing. And was like, you know, this is not gonna work. He was marketing Finlandia vodka. And told him like, you know, I like you as a person. I think you have personal qualities would fit. But you have to go back and get involved with indie games and become a producer in indie game and get it to completion, all the pain, and go through that, and then let's talk again. And I called the guy up a year later, and he had done exactly that, and we hired him the next day. And he's now the senior producer on Bugbear's games. So actually doing that stuff will, showing that you have the passion, showing you want to go through the pain where people are not paying you for it, that gets you hired. Not the fact that I want to make games and I have this awesome idea, but I did shit about it.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, for example, we never ever hire game developers based on resumes. I mean, we are not, frankly, not interested in the CVs. We ask for prototypes, for portfolio, that kind of stuff. So that's a great point by you. So just get started doing games.
And I would add that look for, and this is a very worn out word, but look for disruptions in the market. Like when Facebook platform opened, then like almost anybody who did something for that platform made a lot of money. And the first games companies were extremely successful. It was like printing money. And the same happened with iOS when App Store opened. Like you didn't need Supercell kind of talent there, but if you were just able to make any kind of game and add a reasonable monetization loop there, then it was a success. So what's the next disruption? What's the next new platform? It's very hard to say. And people have been talking about HTML5, for example, but it may not be ready yet. And are there any other platforms? Just keep your eyes on those opportunities, and then just go for them. You don't have anything to lose if you are 20 or 22 or
the corollary to that is that when you go to existing platforms, you're in pain if you're a startup and you don't have a lot of resources. Yeah. So, like everybody talks about iPhone, how cool it is, but you know, like this GDC Game Developers Conference, everybody's complaining how hard it is to find users, how competitive it is, and every day you see like people with 20 years of game dev experience at best companies on the planet starting a new indie studio for iOS games. I'm like, how the hell am I going to compete with 20 years of experience from 4 guys who made Fable or whatever?
But I think that's not really the point. The point is to make the best game you can with the passion you have. Like, it's not the point when you're 20 to make a million-selling game.
Yes. So okay. So here's
To learn to
yes,
make good
exactly.
games.
There's 2 different points. Learning's one thing. Building a venture-backed company is a different thing. So exactly, if you want to learn making games, do iPhone games. Obviously, that's the right platform for that. If you want to start a venture-backed company, think very hard how you differentiate on iPhone if you plan to go there.
Okay, let's have a few last questions before concluding. So we've been talking a lot about investments in this panel. So for instance, Petteri and Ilkka, you see a lot of cases, coming to you guys and being that, we have this thing and we really need funding to get it forward and so forth. So, what should the team have together when they come to you?
Well,
Except the great team.
Yeah, well, sometimes we've invested in only a team and a vague vision of what they want to do. Like in the case of Grand Crew, for example. I mean, the team is super experienced, and we like the vision that they had. So they didn't have a single line of code when we invested. The more I invest in games, the more skeptical I get, which is I try to get rid of that. But I would like to see something really great, just one aspect, maybe a demo with just one thing that really shines, that's better than what anybody else has been able to do. And actually that's also my advice, that if you have your game idea, the kind of the idealistic super game, then just try to simplify it so that with your small team you can really execute it well, better than anybody else. And I'd like to see the first glimpse of that, maybe in a prototype or something like that. And then the team, and then I'd like them to think about these 3 key metrics that I talk about, so that I could see some kind of business thinking there. And the last one is kind of execution. Although we try to invest very slowly, in a sense that I'd like to see how the team executes, are they really passionate? Do they work on this day and night? We call this feeling that Jussi and Ilkka talk about, we call it startup angst, that you just feel so restless you can't stop working on your ideas. We look for that quality in the entrepreneurs.
Would you guys change a day?
Many days. So somebody once told me before I really got into the startup game, the companies I did earlier weren't really venture funded. So Amplify was the first venture funded, and I saw startups are a roller coaster of emotional ups and downs all the time. And I was like, yeah, I can take that. Holy shit. It's like one day you're on the top of the world, we're killing it, we're gonna crush it, we're awesome, and then the next day the bottom falls out and you're completely floored. And if you're anything like emotional, like yours truly, it can really wear you out. So there are several days I could well do without, easily.
But then again, game development is similar. You start by making a game, and then you think it's going to be great, and then you just don't get the playability quite right, and you just lose your confidence. You feel, it's never going to happen. But when you make it enough, you learn that if you just keep on doing, the next day you're probably going to feel better again.
Exactly.
And it's just those kind of problems that the time will heal them, and you cannot let them distract you too much, because like I said earlier, we ran out of money, and there was a chance of, running down the company. But I learned actually, without the money, you can run the company pretty far. There's actually a lot of creativity that, you can actually, almost whatever happens, you can survive if you want to. So you just have to have the will of going through it.
Sure.
And I guess that's what you guys are looking for as well in the founders, is that the ability to just keep on driving no matter how hard it seems sometimes, because that, I think, separates the losers and the winners at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually think that that the kind of the best decisions usually get made when you have the least amount of money.
Oh yeah.
Because then you're really like, you are like forced to make those, and there's no excuses, and it's either you're dead or you make those calls. And then like there's like the truth is right there, and you just need to take it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Okay, if you guys have, one advice you want to, pass forward, and maybe in 10 years if you see a guy who comes that, I was there and you gave this one piece of advice, what would it be? Jussi, you look like you'd like to start.
I have no idea what's one piece of advice.
I'm gonna throw one out there. It's a cliche, but I've learned it hard way even in the last few years myself, again and again. But it's focus. Just do one thing and one thing only. That's the hardest thing in the world, by far.
And
Because there's so many exciting stuff you can do, but you need to only pick one. And the difficult thing is not to say that I'm gonna do this. The very, very, very difficult thing is to do, I'm not gonna do that and that and that and the rest of the 500 of my other good ideas. Just do one thing.
So, and focus is saying no to great ideas. Saying no to great ideas, and that's really, 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 really hard. Work with the best people you can find. Absolutely.
Those are great advices. I just repeat what I already said. Just don't give up. That's the thing I learned from one of the greatest game developers in Finland called Harri Tikkanen. He's the founder of Housemarque, and I was a junior programmer back in the day working in Harri's team, and he's really tough on. He works day and night to get the quality there, and I was just ready to give up. I was saying, I told him I cannot do this. But he told me, oh well, just keep on doing it. You're gonna find a way. It doesn't. He didn't want to listen to like whining about it's not gonna work out. He said, well, it doesn't matter. You just go, take some sleep or whatever, and then go back to it because you will figure it out. And that was true. And I've kept that as a guideline, even when it's not about programming. Running the business is that if it seems too hard, then just do something else for a while and go back to the problem, and you will solve it. If you wanna, then everything is possible. So that's my advice.
Yeah. So in addition to focus, what Ilkka talked about, I would just add that nowadays this is an area where you can do quite a lot with very little resources. Like even I did a simple game on my summer holiday. It's called Bathello. It's a battle Othello. It's probably not going to be a huge success if I ever get it launched. But I mean, I'm not a programmer even. So I mean, you guys can probably do a lot. So just do it. Keep on doing day and night, and find other people who work for free and so on. I mean, we look for teams that would survive without us easily, and you can launch games. You can create a company without any money. So but just do it. Don't think about it too much. Just get on and work on, and then do something really big, because then you can, if you try something really big, you start with small things, but you try to do something really big, then you get the best people to back you up, like Jussi said. And the probability of succeeding is pretty much a constant. If you try something easy or if you try something huge, I mean, the probability is about the same. So you should try to do something huge.
But the big doesn't mean complicated. Need to have focus, because oftentimes people want to make the game they always dreamed of, which will have this and that, and it's going to combine the whole world, and that's where it goes wrong. You have to have big dreams, like becoming the first game to have 1 billion downloads or something like that, but not anything super complicated. That's in my opinion, because you just will fail.
Okay, those were good concluding words. So thank you to all of our panelists. Let's give them a big hand. So if there's anyone out there who would, like to get help in the start, go to startupsauna.com. The program for the fall is starting. The applications are starting in August. It's a 6-week program. We give a bit of funding so your team will perhaps stay alive if you don't eat that much during the program. Also, if you're interested in showing what you have, you already have a company, please come to Slush. It's the largest startup conference in Northern Europe. We're organizing it in November. Go to slush.fi to find more about that. But thank you for coming.
We're sat on our seat, munching bacon every